And we are live. I'm John O'Loughlin. Welcome to my show. It's called McDuff Lives 2. And tonight we are interviewing Professor Hamamoto for the first time in almost a month. It's just great to have you back, Daryl. And welcome to the show. Thanks again for being here.
Thanks so much, John. It's been far too long. It seems more than a month. I missed you.
And I miss you too. And it's amazing. We have had a number of really interesting conversations, and I think to me, it's really important that everybody focus. Remember where this all comes from, and it's from Professor Hamamoto's great book called Servitors of Empire, the untold story of what's the bottom line? The
The
untold
studies in the dark side of Asian America.
exactly, yeah. And when I got into that book and saw the scholarship and the everything's footnoted, everything is put together, but there's also a great deal of just depth of studies of people, such as the Sung family, and the what you come away from this with is a sense that wow, I see how you get a sense of how this thing works. That in Asia, for example, and 200 years ago, it could have been Ireland. 100 years ago, the Pale in Russia. But people are oppressed. They don't have enough to eat. They're seeking a better life, and a chance comes along, and of course they take it. They say, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. Even if the chance is just that maybe your kid or your grandchild could succeed in America, you want that. You dedicate your life to it. And so from that point of view, it makes a lot of sense to me, and I can see it happening in my own family with the tragedy of the Irish, the genocide. It's not a famine; it was a genocide, and the driving my ancestors out of their homeland over here, and they had nothing, so they had to work their way up. And I'm sure that compromises were made and offers were accepted that perhaps uh, led them into morally compromised positions. That's what happens. That's
Mm.
why we have to study this thing from not just from the bottom, but also from the top, and to see where's the motivation. Why are people exploiting other people? And that's been a huge subject of our talks. So let me toss it at you now and say and start off with the idea. Um, it doesn't have to be Asians, right? I mean, anybody can be a servitor.
Oh, it's a universal paradigm, a universal model. And the subtitles, the studies in the dark side. You were describing the bright and beautiful aspect of humanity and individuals in it. Yeah, we know that, but we need to look at both ends of it.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk a little bit, I guess, a bit, later about Zbigniew Brzezinski and some of these foreign policy intellectuals that come out of Johns Hopkins and Columbia, and these individuals. Now, e- as flawed as they are, as myopic and perhaps maybe even ideologically driven as they are, I think people like Henry Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski, some of the not the elective officials, Clinton undeservedly got, and same with Hillary Clinton, got undeservedly got some respect for being a policy wonk. But it's those people behind there. They know the duality of humankind. They know the types of, as you mentioned, compromises that have to be made in life, in the job, and in the professions, whatever it might be. And I've said this time and time again, and I think it's really important for us to restate this at this point. I've stated this time and time again. That doesn't bother me. Organized crime does not really bother me. Uh, Cutting corners, institutionally, whatever, that happens, right? It's universal. It's been going on since the Garden of Eden, right? But we're in a different situation here because we have people who have been brought along in this system that are trying to take the human race, the species, in a different direction. And that direction might be a dead end. So that puts them in a different category altogether. Give me, we've talked many times about the Kennedy assassination, John F. Kennedy, and other types of spectacular crimes that have been committed in public and in private. But as bad as they were, none of these people were trying to exterminate large segments of the population. They were looking after their own interests, if you want to put it in those sort of pragmatic terms.
Yeah, yeah, it's that's where it comes to eventually, because why have they enlisted all these servitors, over the past, 9, 10 decades, or even longer? Well, why? The wave of Russian and East European Jews that came over in the 1880s, 1890s, they provided the seed ground for a tremendous amount of scientists and psychologists and medical people. But these people wouldn't go out and hang out a shingle and try to help the person down the street. They would go because they got compromised or accepted a compromise. They will go and work for one of these people that run things behind the scenes. We were talking with Mark the other night about how even Rockefeller, you can't say Rockefeller is the end. He's a face in representing something even more behind him. And like, you don't hear Carnegie as much as you do Rockefeller, but nevertheless, Carnegie might be even more of a force as we start looking into the Carnegie Institute and all of the amazing connections they have with our medical issues that are going on right now through Carnegie Mellon and all the other places that have been examined. But talking, I ran into a character. I'd heard the name before, Daniel Coit Gilman, and you and I we discussed him briefly offline. But I first heard that name because it is the name of a school for boys. I think it's integrated now, but boys' school in Baltimore, a private school that was a feeder school for Johns Hopkins. I had not known that Daniel Coit Gilman was the president of Johns Hopkins for like 25 years. And after that, he went to become the president of University of California, Berkeley. Now, this guy is a skull and bonesman. He is a Carnegie president. He is a Yale alumni. He has been involved in all of these secret society shenanigans, and he is praised as the father of academic research institutions. Academic research institutions brings me right into your ballpark, does it not?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's the Carnegie, I don't know, corporation that did this designation of higher education, and they designated the highest level research institutions as R1. That comes from Carnegie. And he was, he came before the Carnegie really got in power, but his bones, so to speak, came from Yale. He was charged with the responsibility of creating a far west division of Yale University called the University of California, and that's what he did. And as Yale had a global presence before the age of globalization. They had a Yale in China, in Yan'an, and one of the people that was patronizing the Yan'an facility was none other than Mao Zedong. And that's probably where they found him. Hey, this is a guy who's the son of a modest landowner. He could be the ruler, the new emperor here, and let's see how far we can take him. So these are people who are planners. They have a strategic vision, and what they seem to have as an advantage over us is a really, gosh, it's almost like a religious zeal.
Hmm.
If it's not religious itself, it's something very, very close to a zealotry, and nothing's going to stop them from that. For the rest of us, we're trying to figure out, are we going to find a deposit at the end of the month? Is the check going to come through, right? Pay our monthly bills, whatever they might be. But these individuals, since, as you know, the part of the deal of Skull and Bones is that they take financial worry out of your life.
Mm-hmm.
That's taken care of. But the deal is you're going to have to work on their behalf in order to create this, to realize this vision that they have of the world. And I think we're seeing the end game of it. It's a technotronic, biopolitical world that has been scoured free of most of the useless eaters around the world. And if you want to take it even further, because I'd like to find out what the spiritual, the metaphysical life of someone like a Gilman. What we're seeing here is that a making over, a re-engineering on a planetary level of its atmosphere, right? Terraforming the oceans. Some say, and I don't know if this, if I'm there yet, but I'm reading literature on it that might hint at it. The idea is to remove the human species in place of some off-planet life form that has designs on planet Earth. And I'm coming through this by this guy named George Church, who's, I think you've talked about him before, the guy at Harvard Medical School. And I mentioned earlier on about panspermia. He's totally into panspermia. And this is the receding of Earth from foreign life forms. Call it bacteria, maybe viruses. That's George Church.
I can't go there. That's just too. Once you start talking about bringing in foreign life forms, to me, it's like, you can solve anything with foreign life forms. You can solve any puzzle. Just bring in the space Nazis, and you can explain anything. I'm not against that type of study. It's just not something that I particularly find compelling. I think, but what I wanted to explore with this Daniel Coit Gilman, getting back to the skull and bones aspect of it, because here he is he's called a co-administrator of the Russell Trust. Now, the Russell Trust is the money behind Skull and Bones. So you mentioned that, if you're into Skull and Bones or whatever, smelly robe society you've chosen to I love that term from George Webb. But if you decided to don that smelly robe and go down into that crypt and lay down into that coffin and have them do their whatever they do, and I won't even try to guess what it is, but I think it's kind of icky. But they can do their icky stuff, and then you get up, and then you're good to go. You'll never have to have a financial worry again, because of the Russell Trust. The Russell Trust is right behind all you guys, and does that not represent all the dark money that has been amassed through the heroin, through the slave trade, through the opium trade, through the exploitation, the trafficking of humans, slavery, all of that dark money? Where's the end of it? It's the Russell Trust, and Skull and Bones has never ever has shown any signs of being financially in any straits. So I say Russell Trust money, the old opium money, the dark money, the dirty money, was used to form Johns Hopkins University and the University of California as his mission for the Bones societies. And so, this is at the very beginning of these great institutions, a a dark side.
Absolutely. Now, these institutions and some of the principal figures that come out of it, like Daniel Gilman, they're on the Atlantic seaboard. They're in the East Coast, right? But where did the Skull and Bones, the Russell Trust, or what became the Russell Trust, where did they extract their wealth? And before them, the Dutch masters, it was in
Yeah.
Asia. That's
Hmm.
why I've always been interested in the Asian part of the world in modern history, because that is what, while they were underdeveloped, like China, Indochina, and up and through Southeast Asia and the South Asian continent, Western Europe was building, Central Europe to a certain extent. There was a redistribution of global wealth for the past 400 years. Now we're at a crossroads because China is now probably the number one superpower economically, militarily. And people are really trying to figure it out. I mean, I'm not, us, but the policymakers, the big boys, the big girls, are trying to figure out how they are going to negotiate this particular end game. They thought that they would be on the top at the pinnacle by themselves, but they see it's already occupied. You've got Russia there, and you've got China primarily. And that's where your people like your Zbigniew Brzezinski's, and before that your Heinz Kissinger's, and before that Paul Nitze come in. They're supposed to read the tea leaves and let the capitalists to know what direction we're heading in and how we can make sure we, meaning not me, but not you, but the capitalists, how the capitalists can position themselves to take advantage of even the worst adversity. That's what was so great about Carnegie or the Rockefeller, the great business names that we're all familiar with, is that they'd wind up on top no matter what. Going down, going up, they managed to figure it out, amass wealth going up or going down.
Yes, Vanderbilt,
Yes.
Cornelius Vanderbilt, just an amazing ability to do whatever it took to enrich himself over and over and over again. Uh, eh, you know, I you have to work at it. You have to have a personality that's that well. Yeah, I mean, think of Vanderbilt out there as a young man. Starting out his very own first business, which was the water taxi business, from I think from Staten Island into Manhattan or something like that. And he would be out there bumping into the other guy's water taxis, trying to beat him to the wharf, trying to be the first guy there so he'd get the next fares to come back the other way, and just that kind of elbows out businessman, boom, boom, boom. That that's hard work, but
Yeah.
somehow some people just get it in them. It's in their blood. It's like they're a racehorse. They're a thoroughbred. They're going to go for it. But on top of that, though, I'm afraid we also have some really crazy ideas about right and wrong and morality that are coming to the surface now as we uncover the secret societies and the real horror that's behind these secret societies. I I have pulled my punches about the Masons for years and years. I know people in the Masons. Masons are pretty popular organizations, and they have lodges all over the place. And I don't want to take a cheap shot at anybody, but if you look at Albert Pike and read his works, this guy. This is flipped out stuff. This is wacky.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
what it is integrating the old Babylonian religion, through Egypt and Rome and the Templars and wherever we've traced this many times. But that is the opposite of Christianity,
Yeah.
where if you have a golden rule and everybody obeys the golden rule, then you've got a peaceful place. I mean, the people describe Confucius in China under Confucius in that way. That these are gentle people that wouldn't hurt anybody, and that kind of an ethos has existed in history and can exist again, and has existed in small communities. But overall, the United States has been a fair game for the old European financial tricks, the bait and switch, the confidence game,
Yes.
and we fall for it because we're like, yeah, hey, golden rule, and the corporations come along and say, yeah, yeah, give me the gold, and we'll give you the rules.
Well, it's kind of charming and endearing to a certain extent. Not so funny and endearing these days, but your 19th century writers like Mark Twain and even Melville, to a certain extent, would kind of say, wow, we're really letting ourselves open. Our naivete, the expansiveness of the land says you don't really realize what the rest of the world is like. It's just a bunch of people who are out to fleece you, right? Melville himself wrote a novella, The Confidence Man. And for him, and this is like in 1860 or something like that, for him, that was the model of what America was already becoming back then. And of course, Mark Twain, and the more he wrote, the more cynical he got about America as it became industrialized. So that took place. That went on for at least another more century to where at this point. But now we've reached this crossroads where the biotechnology is something qualitatively different. And rather than speak, well, they're important, the Rockefellers and the Wellcome Trust and, all these characters that we all know. I think the real dangerous people are people like the guys in the white lab coats, George Church, Anthony Fauci, the demagogues of bioscience who have the hubris of saying that we're going to, the title of this book is Exercise in Hubris itself. It's titled Regenesis, and he means that quite literally. We're
Oh
going to
yeah,
go back to the garden and we're going to just remake life forms,
because God
all
screwed up.
life forms.
God
Mhm.
really screwed up, and it's up to us to fix God's work, right?
That's his operating assumption. I'd like to find out what his spiritual life is about. Is he a Luciferian? He's got to be.
Yeah, they think that, you've heard the term the perfectibilism, perfectibilists. This was the Illuminati time, with Weishaupt back in the 1780s and 90s. And
Mhm.
the idea was, we think that humans are, imperfect, but they could be improved. And so we believe in perfectibilism. And in order to, achieve our goal, we have to do science. We have to think about, how some people are probably more worth preserving than other people are, and we have to kind of think about the race as a whole. No,
Mhm.
when you think of public health, right? Realize that you can, like, that's two-sided coin. Public health, meaning we're going to make sure that everybody's healthy. Are we going to take care of all the individuals? That's the way everybody thinks of it, right? I'm for public health. Yeah, tell me if I'm sick, I want to have the public health service to have the specialists to tell me, how to cure my malaria or whatever it is. Sounds like a great thing. But look at public health not as an individual thing, but as a global thing. And then you can say to yourself, you know what? There's too many defective people in the gene pool. We have got to get rid of these bad genes. And that's what they did in the 19th century. And that's what Oliver Wendell Holmes, the Chief Justice of the United States, did. He said, 2 generations, 3 generations of imbeciles are enough.
Mhm.
Just completely accepting the false science that intelligence was passed on through your parents and genetics. And they didn't know anything about genetics, but they assumed that they did. Why? Because they had a certain outcome they wanted, and they massaged their quote science unquote to make it fit the outcome they wanted. And it's
Mhm.
disgusting. And it is very much alive today, that type of thinking, where I can I know that, this disabled child here, they're going to have a terrible life. They're living in an institution, no family. What are they going to do? We have got to find some way to cure, X disease, and
Mhm.
the only way we can really do it is to test it on a human. So, and they did. They tested these things on children. They tested them on people in prisons. They've tested them on people that were, locked up in mental institutions, and that's been going on forever. It only stops, and it stops, because they get caught. But there's a lot of it. I don't think they've caught everybody yet. I think it's still
Mhm.
going on. And then, gosh, I don't even want to think about what they're doing now. When you've heard the phrase humanized mice.
Oh yes,
Oh man,
there are
and the
there
little
are
monkeys.
hybrids, right?
Yeah.
Hybrid human beings. They're called greys colloquially, and I'm fairly convinced that they abound. I don't know if they abound, but they are definitely a force. You can see pictures of them. You can see the pigs, and in
But
fact, it was UC
the little
Davis
mice.
that they perfected the chimera pig. They were advertising this a few years ago.
Yeah.
'Cause, they have that the ag school where they can do all this stuff. But John, are you suggesting that perhaps these people that we're dealing with today in 2021, that they are an extension of these people who were going from false science, right? Which later we call it eugenics, right? Do you think they're an extension of it? Because a lot of these apologists for the new synthetic biology, they're aware of that history and they're claiming that they repudiate that earlier history of abuse, and that they're presenting something to us that is wholly new morally and ethically. It needs to be tweaked a little bit, but they're convinced, again, they have that zeal. They're convinced that they are doing their best for humanity. This is your George. I'm just using George Church's name as a sort of
Yeah.
a sign, a symbol.
Now, is he a medical doctor?
He is a MD, PhD, I believe. He's at the Harvard Medical School,
And
and
I don't remember him. If I talked about him, I don't remember much about him. Tell me a little bit.
he's very media savvy. He went on, Steve Colbert. I don't know if you know who he is. He's sort of on
Yeah.
the liberal paid off side of the quote unquote comedy spectrum. But he goes on the Colbert Show. He knows that that's what kids watch, right, to get their news, their headlines.
Yeah.
And this starts with Jon Stewart. And he brought this book, Regenesis, encoded supposedly on DNA on a little tab. And Stephen Colbert made a grab for it and was going to eat it. Right.
Mm.
So it's funny. And he retells his story on himself in the end of this Regenesis book. These guys are very playful, not like the buttoned up scientists of age old, right? Who no one knew about them, right? They weren't public figures. They weren't pop culture individuals. But today, all these guys have to be performers in addition to being researchers. I mean, Anthony Fauci gets a lot of face time on the media, doesn't he? I don't even know when the last time he's been in a lab. His lab coat is more of a costume than anything else. Same with all these individuals. A lot of flim flam, and it would be ludicrous if it weren't for the fact that people are and have been and probably will continue to die based on some really flawed, if not outright fraudulent science. But you come from the profession of law. How do you bring these people to justice? How do you hold them accountable? It doesn't seem to be working. Even Rand Paul, Senator Rand Paul, has caught figures lying to his face in Congress, contempt of Congress, and these people are still running around free.
You know, you bring to mind a metaphor for what I was just saying about public health. We also have the same issue in justice. In the case of justice, here's somebody that has been wrongfully treated. Let's say Julian Assange, for example. I don't know how you feel about him, but let's just assume that he's a good guy and he's being, horribly mistreated in order to keep him quiet and, impair his health to the point where he won't be able to tell the story when he does get out. That scenario is a violation of every moral principle that I can think of because he's not been there's no evidence that he's committed a crime. It's all just about whether they can extradite him to the United States or not to supposedly face a crime that didn't exist, and they know it didn't exist. So it's all a a, uh, a mechanism to achieve a greater goal, and that is to keep Julian Assange quiet. Because why? Because the real justice in the world depends upon once in a while having to shut somebody up. And doggone it, I wish we didn't have to do it. But if we let him talk, he's just going to yammer and yammer and yammer, and everything's going to come out. And these great programs that we're doing, and the wonderful stuff we did, it's all going to be about what we did that time to the puppies. We should not have done that to the puppies, but he'll tell all about it, and that'll be the end of all the great programs we've been working on. So we got to keep them shut up. That is a public, a question of justice that looks at it from the big picture of, yeah, it's too bad about this guy in the prison and in solitary confinement and all, but what can we do? Because we have to look out not just for him, but for the entire world. It's all on our shoulders, and we are the people that have to make these difficult decisions. But because we know we are the people that have been entrusted with these decisions, we can not only make these decisions, but we can live a very happy, jolly life and kid around with each other and go on talk shows and make jokes with Stephen Colbert, because
Mhm.
we know that, we're the top. We're the guys that make the decisions. So why should we worry?
Well, absolutely. I do say that people, let's say Stephen Colbert, Jimmy Kimmel, and some of these other smart asses that you see on mainstream media, I think they're about ready to have the smirk wiped off their self-satisfied face, because the vectors that are being put out there do not stop at a studio. They don't have some sort of magic immunity that they've been led to believe. Everybody thinks that they're going to be the ones on the other side of the 6 foot steel blast door, right? You're going to be amongst the saved, not the drowned. That's what,
Yep.
especially in the celebrity culture, and that could be celebrity people in academia's, academic celebrities like George Church. They think that they're protected,
Hmm.
and time and time again, it's been proven to be not the case, right? We've known any number of individuals, high flyers, who wind up taking a very long trip down into the concrete, right? James
Well,
Forrestal, for example.
and they swear these oaths, I don't know if Forrestal swore an oath or not, but they do. They swear these oaths that, if I, remember, cross my heart and hope to die. Well,
Yes.
yeah, I mean, they said, yeah, I literally give me the knife, I'll stick it in myself, because I am making an oath that if I break this oath, and you can do all these horrible things to me. And I always get the vision of Hillary Clinton cackling at the TV screen and announcing, uh, that, we came, we saw, he died, when they killed Muhammad Gaddafi, in a very gross way, with a, say they stuck a sword up his rectum, and that is a typical Masonic death if you violate your oath, like Roberto Calvi, that ended up hanging upside down like the hanged man on the tarot cards from London Bridge,
Right.
because he was not able to sustain his role in the money laundering at the Vatican Bank and Branco Ambrosiano. The story that we've told from reading about Operation Gladio, and the Operation Gladio itself is a great example of a program geared to murder people, just to murder them, get rid of them. They're in the way. If you were working for U.S. intelligence after World War II, your job was to do whatever was necessary to control Italy. Because if you
Mhm.
couldn't control Italy, you couldn't control the Mediterranean. And if you couldn't control the Mediterranean, you couldn't control the oil routes. So you had to have Italy. And so whatever it took, even though the communists, or the people that joined the communists, because the communists were organized to fight as you know resistance fighters in France, in Italy, and other countries in Europe, the very ones that did all of the great resistance fighting were the communists, and they just annihilated them after the war. They sent out the goon squads, the mafia, all the hitmen were out there just killing
Mhm.
people because they were communists, even though they had saved the entire country.
Yeah, absolutely. And that happened in the Spanish Civil War. The people in the famed Abraham Lincoln Brigade, these American volunteers there, most of them were leftists and they were communists. These were people, the classic communists that we, at least in some cases, have some sort of fondness for. People like Noam Chomsky, before he told us that we should just stay inside our house, and if we don't get fed, that's our problem. I used to have a great deal of respect for Chomsky, and he comes out of that tradition. He knows it. His family was from that tradition, but something happened to the left. The left has become the right. The people who we used to admire as volunteers in the Spanish Civil War, or even the resistance fighters in France, who were a lot of them were communists during World War II, and in Italy, they've morphed into something into its opposite. And it took a long time for me to realize that, hey, I'm respecting an entity that no longer has any relevance. In fact, they're on the other side. They've changed.
They don't understand it. They don't see it. You're saying exactly the same thing. I made a comment today that I posted on Twitter that said pretty much the same thing. I said, the progressives. Here's a news bulletin for you. If you're a progressive, you have been completely and totally defeated. You have been bushwhacked. You have been destroyed. The progressive movement in this country has been killed. And how did it happen? Orange Man did it. Orange Man did it. All you needed to do was hold Orange Man up in front of all the liberals and shake him around and say, look at Orange Man. If you don't do what we say, you're going to get Orange Man. And so they said, Orange Man's coming, and look at Orange Man's back. And so, they got distracted. And I told him, I said, you guys, you've got to look behind your back. You know, the guy that's yelling up and down and telling things you hate, in front of your face, he's only half of the act. The other half of the act is sneaking up behind you, and you're going to take all your stuff, and you're not going to know it. And now, guess what happened? You look around, and where's your progressive ideals? Where's your pussy hat projects? Where's your feed the poor? Where's your support for? Where's your get rid of the student loans? Where's all of these great ideas that were doable, but it fell for the Orange Man. The Orange Man that's what did it. It was, they knew how to do it. They knew Trump would just absolutely drive those guys crazy. So they put Trump up there and they said, Donald, go for it, and he did. And he did his little dance and everything. And they're like, oh, now you can't use the song from the gay people. You're using the gay people's song. You can't use that. He was aggravating them. What was the song from the Village People, right?
YMCA.
Yeah, YMCA. I mean, that has got to make them crazy. He can't have that as our song. Well, he
Wow.
did, and they got distracted, and now they're paying the price because Joe Biden is no progressive. No, no. Joe
No.
Biden is there to do whatever the DuPonts and the Rockefellers and the Kissingers tell him to do. And
So, John, you're telling me that your friends, they sincerely thought that Biden was going to be the antidote to Orange Man? They really were convinced of
no,
that.
it's not that they didn't think, not that they thought he was going to it was just that if you didn't vote for the Democrats, you were going to get stuck with Orange Man. That's
Uh-huh.
what I'm saying. So it became a question of it's a no-brainer.
Mhm.
Of course I'm voting for Biden. What's my choice? Orange Man?
Right.
I'm not even going to, I wouldn't even want to talk to you. You're telling me you're going to vote for Trump? I don't even know you anymore, Jackson.
Mhm. Well, yeah, this brings me to we've talked about this before, the degree to which the Pentagon now controls the American electoral system. And I came across an individual who comes out of hippy dippy San Francisco, East Bay, Sausalito area. Her parents were hippies. And I came across her name is Montgomery McFate. It sounds like something out of a James Bond novel, but that's her real name, Montgomery McFate. And it turns out she's married to a guy named Sean McFate, who's also one of these hotshot policy people. But she comes out of anthropology, and people like her war game, that scenario you exactly laid out, John. They've figured out how you're going to whipsaw people emotionally, so they're not really thinking. This comes right out of the social sciences. This comes out of years because you've read the Phoenix program, Doug Valentine and all that.
Yeah.
All that type of research that they gathered in the Vietnam War and earlier the Malaya conflict in Britain and putting down the communist rebellion in the Philippines. They brought all that research and development back here to the American homeland, and they have Montgomery McFate teaching this stuff at the Naval Academy. She's a professor there. These are all academic types who are running the whole psyops here, and they're Pentagon employees. And these are people who supposedly, like our erstwhile liberal friends, who saw themselves as free birds, free spirits. And they said, well, listen, if we don't do it, worse people are going to do it. So we're going to go in there and get our hands dirty instead of just, calling in plays from the sidelines. We're going to go in there. Montgomery McFate and her husband, what a power couple, Sean McFate. He writes cheesy action novels like C.J. Box, right? Because you want to make it cool. And then he writes these strategy books about how we need to go into the human terrain system and find out about psychology to defeat the enemy. Hardware is not going to do it. America, this is Sean McFate saying this, America hasn't won a war since World War II. Everything else has been a stalemate or a draw. Now, what they don't realize, of course, is that that's precisely the point. Never winning. It never ends. There's no armistice or peace treaty that's signed. The perpetual self-licking ice cream cone keeps going unmelted. That's just the whole idea. Unfortunately, there's a lot of collateral damage, and that's us now. Used to be people overseas. Now it's us here in the U.S.
And they want us to accept it. Here's Halloween coming along, and I've never seen so many skeletons and those sugar skull heads, and the kids have got them, the whole skeleton thing on their body. I mean, we used to dress up. I'm not saying that you can't dress up on Halloween, but I'm not talking about the kids so much. I'm saying everywhere you turn, there's a skeleton and a tombstone and something of to remind you of death, and they want us to be able to accept it when massive deaths start happening. I'm afraid that they're pre-programming our brains to accept these things with with those violent games like Grand Theft Auto and all of that stuff. Th- this that Harley, what's her name with the baseball bat? Harley Quinn, named after the woman that's named after the Harlequin yeah, card in tarot. It's just a woman that's dressed up. She has a baseball bat and she calls herself Harley Quinn, and she's a dystopian. You know,
Mhm.
she's
Mhm.
sexy, but she's
Ah,
dystopian, and they mix those things together to get kids to like it. Now,
oh,
sexy
absolutely.
dystopian. Oh man, this is really out there. I love this stuff. Well, that's psychological warfare, and it's been our media has been doing it to us forever and ever. I mean, just like I really do think that Tucker Saucy's right when he says that the media all comes from the Jesuits. They were running uh, scenes in front of candlelit projectors, in the 1500s, and they understand the power of theater and the power of affecting people with with motion pictures. God had to have been their project. It looks like it was, and everything we're doing
Mhm.
now. Yeah.
That's the
Oh,
camera obscura.
yeah.
The camera, it shows that image on the on the opposite side. And that's the basis of modern cinematography, right? Which was, again, was sold to us as another technology that's going to bring us together, educate us, and enlighten us, right? Just like television later, and you know what happened there. And of course, new media, so-called, the internet, was going to bring everybody a new level of awareness and intelligence. Now, the only medium that I'm still holding up hope for, John, and I gave talks on this last week, is terrestrial radio. And I use the two examples, Art Bell and then Bill Cooper, William Cooper. He was a shortwave radio guy. And I think he was a radio man in the military. They both those guys knew radios inside and out, the technology. But Bill Cooper did shortwave radio, and then he wrote that classic book, Behold a Pale Horse. He was shot to death on his own property, suppose for some flimsy excuse. He already had announced that he was going to uphold the U.S. Constitution. Art Bell died at 72 of I don't think he wasn't shot to death, but he died prematurely. He seemed to be, fairly healthy. And I did a whole rundown of and on the other part of the spectrum as well. Alan Berg in Arizona, he was a liberal talk show radio host who was murdered, supposedly by quote unquote white supremacists. But now that's the story, I believe, when it came out and was reported by the Southern Poverty Law Center. But now that I know what the SPLC is, I think Alan Berg out in Arizona might have been killed by the feds and then blamed it on the what Barack Obama called the bitter clingers, right? There's all these different double and triple games, but I still think that radio, shortwave radio in particular, because a lot of amateurs can do it, fair without very much of a barrier of entry there, that we're going to be able to recover our voice through the airwaves again. It's going to be very difficult to cut that off. The internet, yeah, you can just put a kill switch on, it's gone.
Yeah,
Shortwave radio, not so easy.
that's a good thought. Yeah, and you can. By the way, you can get shortwave radio receivers, not too expensive. You don't need a license to listen to them. So I think it's a good investment. I should get one. My uncle CG, my mother's brother, was a big ham radio guy, and I used to love to go visit him and visit his radio shack, down in the basement, and he was really into it. So yeah,
That must,
it's a great hobby for kids to get into, both
you
boys and
know, I'm sure you're the same way, but a lot of my teenage friends were into it as well.
girls. Hmm.
There's a mail order company called Heathkit.
Yeah, I
You
remember.
remember them?
I had a Heath kit, yeah,
Oh, okay. Tell us about that.
and
Take us back, John.
single sideband radio. Yeah, that's what it was. I still don't understand it, but it's yeah, Heathkit. You could build your own radio, and I think I built one. My uncle was the guy that built radios, so not me. Oh, well, that was a
Well,
long time ago. I wanted to ask your opinion, and I know we don't
yeah.
have much time left,
Mhm.
but and think of think about Mao Zedong. We started mentioning him as a prospect that, quote, they, unquote, were looking at and see how far could we bring this kid. I think they were doing that to my dad too, by the way. This guy, how far can we bring this guy?
Mhm.
Well, while my dad didn't work out for them, Mao seems to work out very well. And, he was at Harvard, I think, for a year, was it? Or was it Yale?
Oh,
Anyway,
Mao? I don't think he ever left China.
no,
Mao
no,
Zedong.
he was in one of
Oh, really?
those institutions for some time. Yeah, well,
Well, there
maybe it's
was Yale in China. It was in China. It was in Yan'an. Maybe that's what it was you're talking
maybe
about.
so, but
Yeah.
let's save it for another time. But
Oh,
but
okay.
the question
Mhm.
is communist China really a great big servitor for the empire? In other words, the financial empire that we talk about, the Wall Street and the London banks and the Venetians and all of that stuff that has organized, from two world wars and all of this horrible ongoing conflict, the war that never ends, the ones that have organized that. When you look back through the history of China, um, can you just think about it, and we'll talk about it next time. But I would suspect that Mao was himself a servitor and doing the bidding of a hidden hand behind him. And are we in that situation now with President Xi? Because that is a very important question. In other
Yeah.
words, are we really looking at just two faces of Henry Kissinger when we look at the governments of the world? Um, I, I'm not saying I'm right, but I think it's something that would be very interesting to have maybe spend a whole hour thinking about Mao Zedong and who is he? Was he really a communist at heart that led his people to the People's Republic of China through his own, or was he actually working on behalf of a hidden interest that we still have to deal with?
Well, that's an interesting question, and I don't think even Zbigniew Brzezinski would attempt to answer that one. I'll just go on my like yours. We read in the same areas. I'll just go back to some of the demonstrated prophecies, the ones that came true. Albert Pike, Giuseppe Mazzini. They said we were going to go through this process of revolutions, world wars, and eventually end up into a one world system. Has that not, happened? I
In
think there are
general, that's where they're going. Yeah.
yeah. So there are different players on the chessboard that they could be Mao Zedong, could have been Ho Chi Minh, whoever it is out there. It could have been Adolf Aloysius Hitler, for that matter. But they're just played on that grand chessboard, to use Brzezinski's famous image right there. Because I think he knows. He doesn't want to talk about it, but I think because he comes from nobility, he comes from Polish nobility, and that's who you really got to look at. They're the ones that have never really let go of the control lever right there. The bankers, they work for them, but the bankers, in order to have legitimacy, need the plumed serpent on the feathered throne. They need to have an emperor. They need to have someone on that
Yes.
throne there to give them legitimacy, supernatural legitimacy. So I think it's those families that we can look at. That's why I'm so interested in bloodlines and
Yeah.
genealogies.
Okay. Well, I think that's a good thought to leave it on tonight. Yeah, they do. They'd love to have the pageantry of nobility and the ceremonies and the mysticism that comes along with ceremonial acts. Walking down a red carpet with a train of 30 feet behind you, and 17 ladies in waiting that are carrying your stuff. All of that stuff, ceremony, as Shakespeare called it, but for ceremony, there wouldn't be any empire. And it's true. Very, very, very astute observation. And yeah, I want to do some more studying myself on my little pet theory. I'm probably not original to me, but with Kissinger, still pulling strings behind it, he having opened China, quote unquote. Uh, I'm not going to just walk away from that. I think there's something there, and what's
Yeah.
going on right now. Are we really looking at war with China, or is just another back and forth threat to keep pumping up the military budgets and to keep doing
Mhm.
more and more of this nasty research
Mhm.
that we've identified? That's where we're
No.
at today.
Yeah, I'd agree with you on Kissinger, especially since he's a Rockefeller asset. He has been from the beginning. They plucked him out of obscurity to say you're our guy there, because the Rockefellers, their slogan in the early days was oil for the lamps of China. Right? They were in their early days, and they could see nothing but potential there. So I think they had the wheels were spinning in their heads early on. So it's just a matter of amassing their team of intellectuals, mostly people based in university. Heinz Kissinger was the guy that got the call, and so he's Coke, and then they have Pepsi. They have Zbigniew Brzezinski, right? Supposed to be kind of a rival to Henry Kissinger, but not really. It's just the different. It's like going into the supermarket and you have the different brands of soda water there, but we're going to be the ones that get the cavities.
Miss Hunt in our chat says Charlotte Iserbit, and I never say her name right. Iserbyt, a name we should all know. If you want to study about the really upper level skull and bones folks, her father was one, and she can tell you a lot about them. Of course, she's gone now, but there's YouTubes of her, and Johns Hopkins is a big part of her story as well. So as I start to focus on Johns Hopkins, I'll be looking at her YouTubes with Charlotte Iserbit or Iserbit. Somebody will correct me.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, well, now I think we've burned up the whole hour. Professor, thanks so much for being with me and your patience while I do my little rants. I seem to be on a rant tonight.
Well, I enjoy them, and I'm sure the audience does as well. And thank you for inviting me on as a guest, John. I really enjoyed myself. I missed you, man.
Well, same here, and that means you're going to have to come back again soon.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I will.
All right,
Thank
guys,
you,
if you
everybody.
haven't got Professor Hamamoto's great book, Servitors of Empire, make sure and get a copy of it and enjoy. Thanks very much again. Good night, everybody.
Good night, everyone. Bye.